And I'm playing this music to get us all in the mood to deal with our guest, Rahma Soliman, who I feel is a superwoman. But we are all super people. Super, super, super people. So, again, I am Lorna Harris, and I'm the executive producer of Immigrants Are Us, the Generation Project. Immigrants Are Us, the Generation Project, was basically put together for Immigrant Heritage Week. Our first event was 2019, and our special, amazing guest today was with us when we could still have in person events. In 2019, for Immigration Heritage Week, we held the event at St. Mary's Church in West Harlem. St. Mary's Church is the first church in the East Coast in New York City to offer refuge and serve as a sanctuary for refugees and slaves and during that period of abolition. So it was really great for our guests to be there. And again, the G Project is a public art campaign. And what that means is that we create art, and it is about the art of storytelling. So, with that said, I found out through this public art campaign that I am a G7. Do you know your G status? That's what these G sessions are all about, having a conversation, not just a dialogue, but a conversation about your G status. So, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our guest. Rahma Saliman is originally from Egypt, and she's been working with at the United Nations International Organization for Migration office and as a migration officer for media and communications since 2016. Aside from her work and bringing visibility to migration issues to the UN, she is a project manager for the joint IOM United Nations Alliance of Civilizations initiative. This is a festival called Plural Plus, and Rama will speak to us more about that. But I just want to revisit again the definition of a G status. So, G0 are people who were not born in the United States. G1 is first generation, and G2 is second generation. And as I said, as I shared with you, I am a G7. So, with that said, I really am so pleased and excited to bring on the screen with you my personal superwoman, Rama Soliman. Hi,
Thank
Rama.
you. Hi, Lorna. Thank you so much for the super introduction. I'm happy to be here with you and talking to you and our guests. Hi, everyone. As Lorna mentioned, my name is Rahma and I'm an Egyptian migrant. I've been living here in New York for 4 years and my G status is G0. I wasn't born here in the US. I only came here for work. I started working with the UN Migration Agency, as Lorna said, in 2016, assuming the position of Media and Communications Officer, where I worked mainly on a project called Plural Plus. But before I talk about my work here, I wanted to give you a little background about my life in Cairo before I became a migrant. So I grew up in Egypt from a very traditional family that was not very diverse. Like both of my parents are from Cairo. I grew up in a very traditional like circle. I went to a school where I didn't have any migrants friends. All of my classmates were Egyptians. I wasn't really friends with anybody outside from Egypt. I was everybody I interacted with was very traditional, very Egyptian, and this has only started to change after I finished college. And I studied English and Spanish as a bachelor degree, in my bachelor degree, and I worked in a bookstore, in a multilingual bookstore. And I would say that's when I started learning a little bit about other people through stories. My favorite books were fiction, and I've
Mhm.
always loved stories. And that also was amplified when the Arab Spring happened in 2011. And as you know, this took place in several Arab countries, including Egypt, where people went out to demand democracy and freedom and human rights. And I was working in the bookstore, and I got introduced to all of these issues, which I have never heard about before. I've never learned them deeply. They were not taught at schools.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't exposed to them in any way. I rarely traveled. I would travel like in the summer with my family in some of the coastal cities in Egypt. I wasn't really exposed to international multicultural environment. And as I learned more and more about these issues, about people who were forced to leave, for example, because of wars, because of all sorts of reasons, I decided to learn deeply. And that's when I enrolled in a migration and refugee program. And I
Mm-hmm.
started doing my master's degree. And since then, I worked with refugees as a refugee status determination officer, where I was a paralegal. I helped them prove the refugee status before the UNHCR. And even though the population of the people that I worked with, they were almost all of them were from neighboring countries surrounding Egypt, like Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Eritrea, Somalia. And I was taught about it in schools, like all of the African neighboring countries, but learning from people firsthand was a
Mm-hmm.
totally life-changing experience for me. And even though I was doing legal work, that's when I realized the power of stories and the power of human experiences.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, Lorna, and I was very like the approach that I was approaching this new job, this new legal job, that I will deal with different people from different countries. So I'm trying to find out what is different
Okay.
and interpret it to me so I can understand. But as I was working and hearing the stories of all of these people, I found similarities as I was searching for differences. We're all the same. We
Yeah.
could be coming from different countries, having different cultures, but we all are humans. We all have the same aspirations. We have the same feelings. We all care about our loved ones. We all want the best for ourselves. We care about the people we love. We want the best for our children. We are all mothers, fathers, brothers. These things are the same, even if
Yeah.
wherever you come from. So that was
Mm-hmm.
a very good learning experience for me. And I was doing my master's degree at the same time, so I was studying about migration issues, of how it's related to development, humanitarian issues, human rights, etc. And just by chance, I found this vacancy in New York, and I applied. And for some reason, I got accepted,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really good. So I was like, okay, 3 months in New York, it would be wonderful. And at that time, our organization was just joining the UN as a related organization. So it was a big moment for our organization, and that's when I really started my migration journey, because it was for the very first time in my life, I'm experiencing migration firsthand. I'm living outside of my home country without my family, without my support system.
Mm-hmm.
And I started like experience some of the stuff even that I learned in books about migration, or even when these refugees, when I was working in Cairo as paralegal, told me about how they miss home, for example, how they miss their neighbors, their friends, sometimes family members, certain places they have grown up as children. So yeah, I began to experience all of that. And as I was working at the UN as a media and communications officer, I realized that this is my passion. Like, I like to hear
Mm-hmm.
about people's experiences. I like to give it light, and I love to give voice to the people. And that's how you engage people in these very heavy issues surrounding migration, for example.
Right.
It's the best way through human stories. It's the best way to get introduced to any any type of topic you want.
Rama,
Yeah,
can I interrupt you just for a second? Because that's what the G Project is all about,
yeah,
collecting these stories. And when we first met, and again, audience, Rama participated in the very first workshop
yeah.
of what is your G status. So since you know your G status, what are your feelings? What are your impact, and has it impacted your work in any way at all, knowing that you are a G0 and how you collect these stories and think about, how everybody else has to deal with their G status?
Yes. Yeah, of course. I met, especially here in the US, it's a country that is rich in migrants. Like, it's built by migrants. You have migrants from all over the world, people like you who are G7, like they go back to way, way back.
Right, right, right.
I have worked with migrants, like first generation, second generation, and that was also a learning experience for me. To be honest, I did not have to deal with a lot of stuff that migrants, for example, first generation, had to deal with, like juggling
Mm-hmm.
different worlds and trying to understand your identity when you have
Mm-hmm.
two identities, or when you have two origins, or you live in a country that you go back to a different country. And one of the things that was very interesting to me was, for example, when I talked to these first generation people who, for example, their parents came
Mm-hmm.
from a different country and they were born in the US, right? So they were G1 people.
Yeah,
And they told me how their parents wanted them to grow up exactly like them,
of course.
which was very confusing for a G1 person, because they have never been, for example, sometimes they would come from war-torn countries. They have never been back home before, and they grew up here in the US, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And they have education here. They grew up in a totally different environment here, and they struggle with their parents. For example, like their parents want them to be religious as people are back home. They are surprised that they have all of these resources, all of this knowledge. They really lag behind, and that created misunderstanding between the first generation and the original, like, G0s. So I saw this struggle between the different Gs, and this is something that I've never learned before. So that
Mm-hmm.
was a learning experience also for me.
That's pretty insightful
Mhm.
and powerful. So, how did that get you to work with the film festival, a video festival of collecting stories? Can you tell
Yes.
us about that?
Yeah, so I worked on this festival. It's called a Plural Plus, which is an initiative that is very old. It was older even before I started working on it. I just got lucky enough that the person who was managing this project left, and I took over. But
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed, and I'm happy that luck has gotten me to work on this project, because it's like you said, it's a competition, a film competition for young people who are of age 25 years or less. And the whole idea is inviting these young people of this age category from all over the world. It doesn't matter where you came from,
Really?
to send us videos that talks about migration, diversity, inclusion, and prevention of xenophobia, because we saw this as a raising issue, like an issue on a rise, and it was of concern to us as the International Organization for Migration. And I have been working on this project for almost 3 years now, and I have seen a lot of videos, because every year we usually receive hundreds of videos, and we have to downsize them, like pre-select the best videos, and then we have eventually to select three winners and a special award for the prevention of xenophobia. And the winners, usually we invited them to New York and we celebrated them in a ceremony where we showcased all of the winning videos. And it was like a mini festival, because this type of competition is
Mm-hmm.
not for film, like an hour and a half film. It's just 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And it was very, very interesting and enriching for me, someone who worked with migrants, who studied migration, to see how, like, some young person from Brazil talks about migration, talks about stereotypes, talks about even bullying at school because you are different, because of your skin color, because of your accent, because of who you are. So I really, really got to learn a lot from a young person's perspective about these issues, including the migration, diversity, and how we all belong in the world. Because one of the great things about this festival is that there is a category, it's divided into three different age categories. So anybody, any age. So we used to receive, for the first category, up to the age of 12 years old. So we would receive videos from young kids as young as 7 years old talking about migration, talking about diversity, and how the world would be so boring if it was just in one color, we just came from the same place and we didn't have all of these different ideas and we all contributed to our humanity. So I was very, very like touched,
Mhm.
and I'm still learning. The festival is still going on. We are currently in the phase of selecting the winners for this year. But next year, or every year, we open the call for entries beginning of the year, and we usually close it in around July. But this year, I've also enjoyed watching the videos, especially amid this COVID, and how also everything that happens is
Right.
reflected in the videos. Like it's really a window, at least for us, through this very small initiative, to find out what young people are thinking. What do they want for this world? How, and sometimes even I have to admit, Lorna, I would find like a video that is very simple, very brilliant, much
Mhm.
better, like deliver the message way better than any other like lengthy UN speech
Mhm.
that I hear from world leaders or
Right.
from these UN officials. Like a simple 18-year-old video, like kid or like young person from a different part of the world can offer like an insight that no other
I
head of
believe
government
it.
can do it. So yeah, I did learn a lot. I got enriched a lot. I learned a lot about a lot of cultures too. So that it was, I'm very, very proud of this initiative.
I'm glad you are, and I can't wait to see these films. But another question I have is technology.
Mm.
So these kids, these people are all over the world and they're making these videos. Do they have equipment? Do they have cameras? Like, what is there any criteria or guidelines about how the films are made, the videos are made?
Yes. So yeah. So nowadays, luckily, we have smartphones,
Yeah.
and that has made it very easy for young people. Like I remember, I worked with my colleagues on this project, and they told me we used to ask people to send us the videos in a DVD by
Yeah.
mail,
Yes.
because at that time that was the best way to get it, and they needed, of course, advanced equipment, cameras and stuff. But these days, and that's why we were receiving hundreds of submissions every year, more than the years before. It's very easy with your phone. It can be literally a video that you record yourself just talking about the issues. We always have these sessions online, and even before this year we used to go to universities, to school, to teach, to give ideas to young people. And we basically have only one condition, that the idea should be the young person's.
Hmm.
But they can get help. Like if,
Original.
yeah, if they are kids at school, they can use your teachers as their teachers, for example, or their colleagues as actors.
Hmm.
But the idea, the direction should be the young people. They can also, we do partnerships with other organizations that helps these kids to provide them with these equipments in some parts of the world, like to borrow the camera, for example, or to borrow the tripod, to borrow some props.
Hmm.
But like you said, this day's technology has made it easier, which made the threshold or the ceiling very high, because you have these software programs where you can insert music, insert videos like animation, because we accept all of the genres. It can be like a music video. We had
Hmm.
before a winner, like she made a music video about like someone who left home and how they were accepted again in school,
Right.
in a band. And the end of the video was like they made a song about like humanity and how we're all should be one. So we accept anything. We accept the like music, comedy, animation, even sometimes if the message is like so powerful. Some people send us videos with just a voiceover and some photos,
Okay.
and it's a form of an expression. It's art, like, because the photos are very, very expressive. And if the young person has a message, has something to say, and it's very creative and it's very original, we usually like take it in consideration too. It doesn't have to be a film in the ordinary sense, like, because like you
Correct.
said, technology has offered to us so many ways. So we try to make it as creative as possible and include all of the voices.
So it sounds like the festival has a lot in common and is in alignment with what the G Project is about.
Yeah.
And with that said, Rama, I really, really would like you to talk to us about from being a G0 that we always ask our guests to share something special that's significant. So, what did you bring to share with us?
Yes. So, like I said, I never thought that I would miss Egypt this much. And I think
Mhm.
because I grew up there.
Yes,
I wasn't born here in the U.S., so I'm lucky enough. I'm one of the lucky people that are able to go back home for a visit. I am able to enter my country. I'm able to see my friends and family. I'm able to hear the phrase "Welcome home."
nice.
Some people can't. So
Right.
I go at least once a year, and I live in New York City. So one thing I miss. Most of the time is the warm weather. Egypt is very warm. It has definitely a hotter weather than New York.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, so we have a lot of palm trees, for example, a lot of beaches, a desert, like a very, very big desert. So the other
Mhm.
day, this summer, when I went back home to see my family and friends, I was buying something from a gift shop and I saw these beautiful carpets and I got one. I brought one from me with me back
Oh,
here
that's
in New York.
so sweet.
Yeah, and it has everything that reminds me of home, like, and especially what I miss is the palm trees. I mean, in the U.S. is such a
Can you
beautiful
hold it
country.
up in front of you a bit more so we can really see the whole thing?
Yeah,
Oh, I love, and is this handmade?
it is. Yeah, so in Egypt we have a lot of great women and men, but it's very common for women to do this because they learned it a lot from their like mothers and stuff, and it's handmade, so they can do it
It's
with a very small
tradition.
machine. Yeah, and it's very like for me it might look like something very normal, but I'm like I really miss the sight of the palm trees. And I know the US is such a big country, you do have palm trees and you have
Mhm.
everything, but I'm like in New York when I'm by myself and I'm missing Egypt. That's what I look at. Like I always like look at the palm trees, and that's how at least I have something to look forward when I go back. At least it's a reminder that I can go back.
And it
And
must be very, very, very comforting.
yeah, to
So
see
I
it.
thank you for sharing that with us
You're
and
welcome.
with our audience. And it has been more than exciting, especially during these days and times that we live in, for us to share these stories and for me to personally introduce you to our audience of the G sessions. And we have some more coming up.
Oh, that's
And
great.
yeah, so for the month of November, you were our first guest. And this is a day after a momentous occasion in the United States, as you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So it is just really, I feel like so rewarding and enriched and empowered, as I said in the beginning, to have you as our first guest for November.
Thank you.
And I thank you very, very much. And I'd like to encourage our audience to know what your G status is. Ask your mother, ask your friends, do you know what your G status is? I encourage you to visit our website, www.gproject.org. Visit our social media pages and like them and stay in touch with Rama. Her information will be on our website. And I thank you again, Rama. You are an incredible, super, 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 super woman.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you so much. And I was honored to be here and talk about my migration experience and my G status. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure for the audience. And again, don't forget to go to our website and don't forget to check out our social media. Thank you. Concludes the first session of November of the G sessions. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.